In this video, we are going to analyze the crash of my Mini Skyhunter. I was flying FPV when it went in. Hopefully there will be some lessons learned here which will help you to avoid a similar fate. Let's take a look at what happened. Here we are flying in a Mini Skyhunter with a newly installed Eagle Tree Vector. Everything has been functioning flawlessly. This is the third or fourth flight of the day, and that gap in the trees looks inviting. A little voice in the back of my head says, "Don't do it." But then something else takes over and says, "Hell, shoot the gap." In the next few seconds, the Skyhunter is going to meet its end. Watch the rest of the clip and see if you can tell what caused the crash. Was it a loss of video signal? The loss of the flight control signal? Did the receiver's failsafe setting not work correctly? Or did the Eagle Tree Vector not engage return to home? Well, what do you think was the cause of the crash? If you selected any of the previously mentioned causes, you would only be partially right. The cause was pilot error, which involved all of those factors. Let's back up and take a closer look at all those factors and see how they led up to this event. This clip will give you a view of the tree line. Here's the gap on the left. And now you can see how many trees are between the gap and the ground station antennas. Here is the location of the ground station. For video, I'm using a homemade 4-turn helical and a skew planner antenna. So, here's the ground station, and this arrow indicates the direction in which the helical is pointed. Given the height of the trees and the altitude of the plane, the second arrow illustrates how far the plane would have to travel before having a clear line of sight to the receive antennas. So the area below the level of the trees, from the back side of the tree line to that second arrow, is dead airspace, meaning no video or flight control signals will be received when the plane is in that zone. So when the plane entered the gap, I simultaneously lost video feed, and the plane was also no longer receiving flight control information from my Taranis transmitter. Let's go back to the gap, and I'll describe what I experienced through the goggles at that point. At this point, I experienced a complete loss of signal. I see a message stating "no signal" and nothing but static on the display. I added a little throttle and pulled back on the elevator stick very slightly and then returned it to center. The hope was that the plane would continue on, gain some altitude, and come back into signal range. But simultaneously with me inputting those commands, the Taranis transmitter audibly alerts RSSI critical, telemetry lost. After about 2 seconds of not seeing any video, I hit the return to home switch and then just waited. After a few more seconds, there was still no video, no sign of the plane coming home, and at this point, I knew the plane was down. But wait, the Eagle Tree Vector was set to engage return to home if it didn't see any activity on the S-bus. Earlier in the day, I tested this functionality on the ground by turning off the transmitter. I could clearly see the message indicating return to home was engaged, and the flight mode indicator switched to RTH, return to home. But here is the second mistake. My altitude passing through the gap was about 20 to 30 feet. I clearly remember reading in the manual that the vector will not execute a return to home command if the altitude is below 60 feet. This is a safety feature to prevent the motor from spinning up if you accidentally hit the return to home switch while you're on the ground. You can override the setting, but they tell you to do so with caution. I didn't override the 60-foot limit. It would be nice if Eagle Tree would allow you to lower the limit, say 20 feet, but that's another subject. So at this point, we know I flew into a dead zone and lost the video as well as the flight control link. We also know that the vector would ignore a return to home command if it sensed a receiver failsafe condition because the altitude was under 60 feet. But what about that receiver failsafe? I set that the night before so that the control surfaces would go to neutral with a slight amount of up elevator. Why did the plane roll to the left? Well, here's the third mistake and the final nail in the coffin. On the initial trim flight earlier in the morning, the plane wanted to roll left, so I put in a considerable amount of right aileron trim. I also added a couple of clicks of up trim, but I never bothered to reset the failsafe. So when the receiver lost contact, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It went into failsafe and engaged its original settings, which caused it to roll to the left and to pitch down slightly. So if you want to prevent going from this to this, here are some simple guidelines to follow. Always reset your failsafe settings after making trim changes. Make certain you know what to expect from your autopilot. Look over the flying site and make a mental note of where to expect poor or no signal reception, and then don't fly there. And above all, use common sense. I knew all about these things. I knew where the reception would be bad. I had read and I knew the vector would not engage return to home below 60 feet, but I didn't think of it at the time I was heading for the gap. I also knew to reset failsafe after making trim changes. I had planned to do it later when I got home. I didn't think of that either when I was heading for that gap. That's what I mean about using common sense. I hope you found this helpful, and if it saves you an aircraft or saves you from losing an aircraft, then all the better. As a side note, all the electronics survived and worked fine. I did end up with a scratch on the lens of the run cam too, but that's minor. A new Mini Skyhunter kit has already arrived. We'll finish this video with some clips taken before the crash. I did get out to about 3/4 of a mile with a good solid video link, so that homemade helical antenna seems to be working pretty well. All right, thanks for watching.